The massive crystal chamber floated in the void above Nexus Prime, its transparent walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in carefully arranged circles, each delegation positioned according to ancient protocols that had governed galactic politics for over 10,000 years. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert dozens of alien languages into comprehensible speech. At the center of it all stood Captain Jake Morrison, his Blue Earth Defense Corps uniform looking plain and simple compared to the elaborate robes, ceremonial armor, and biomechanical enhancements worn by the other delegates. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to the charges being read against his entire species. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Carter adjusted her tablet nervously, reviewing the defense arguments they had spent weeks preparing. Council Speaker Zeth Kari rose from his throne-like seat, his 7-foot frame covered in silver scales that caught the light like mirrors. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been questioned in over 2 centuries of life. The translation devices made his words sound cold and mechanical to human ears. We gather today to address the actions of the human species who have shown complete disregard for established galactic law during their brief time among the stars. Zeth Kari's reptilian eyes fixed on Jake as he continued. In the mere 200 years since they achieved faster-than-light travel, they have violated territorial agreements, disrupted trade routes, and ignored non-interference protocols that have maintained peace for millennia. Ambassador Thylas of the Kalani stood up next, her plant-like body swaying as she spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. The humans established mining operations in the Kepler Expanse without consulting the Territorial Council. They claimed the region was empty, but our surveys had marked those systems for future expansion over 3,000 years ago. They show no respect for proper procedures or established claims. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake kept his expression neutral, though he remembered the Kepler situation differently. The human survey teams had detected no signs of Kalani presence in the region. No markers or beacons, nothing to indicate the systems were claimed. When they had tried to contact the Kalani about territorial rights, they had been told to submit formal requests through the council bureaucracy, a process that could take decades to complete. The insectoid hive queen Zixandra clicked her mandibles, together before speaking, her voice a chorus of harmonized clicks and buzzes. Human colonies have disrupted migration patterns of species we have protected for over 5,000 years. Their settlements on Proxima 7 interfered with the breeding cycles of the crystal moths, creatures that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. When we informed them of this violation, they claimed they were unaware of any protected species in the system. Dr. Lisa Carter leaned forward to whisper in Jake's ear. We offered to relocate the entire colony when we learned about the moths. They never responded to our proposals. Jake nodded slightly but remained silent. He knew the truth would not matter here. Counselor Veltar of the Arcturian Empire stood next, his blue skin darkening with apparent anger. His species had ruled over dozens of star systems for 8,000 years and viewed themselves as the galaxy's natural leaders. The humans have undermined established trade relationships that took centuries to negotiate. Their merchant vessels offer goods at prices that make legitimate commerce impossible. They flood markets with cheap products and destroy economic stability wherever they go. More voices joined the chorus of complaints. The Rigelian delegate spoke about human medical teams treating plague victims without waiting for official permission from health authorities. The Centauran representative complained about human explorers making first contact with primitive species in violation of non-interference rules. The Tau Ceti Consortium accused human researchers of sharing advanced technology with developing civilizations. Each accusation followed the same pattern. Humans had acted quickly to solve problems or help others without following proper procedures. They had ignored bureaucratic requirements that could take years to navigate. They had made decisions based on immediate need rather than ancient protocols. Jake listened to it all with growing understanding. This was not really about territorial violations or trade disputes. This was about fear. The established galactic powers had built their authority on complex systems of rules and regulations that took centuries to master. Humans, with their short lifespans and impatient nature, simply ignored these systems when they got in the way of doing what seemed right. Finally, Zethkari gestured for Jake to speak in his defense. The chamber fell silent as the human captain stepped forward. He had prepared a long speech about human intentions and the good they had tried to do, but looking around at the alien faces surrounding him, he realized words would not change their minds. "We came to the stars hoping to find friends and partners," Jake said simply. "When we found worlds suffering from plague, we sent doctors. When we found species facing extinction, we offered help. When we found empty systems with resources that could benefit everyone, we built colonies and invited others to join us. We shared our discoveries freely and asked for nothing in return, except the right to exist among you." Dr. Carter stood up beside him, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "Human agricultural techniques have ended famines on 12 worlds. Our medical advances have saved millions of lives across 15 species. Our research has led to breakthroughs in clean energy that have transformed entire civilizations. We have never sought to conquer or control anyone." The chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then Zethkari spoke again, his voice final and absolute. "The Council has reached its decision. Humanity will be restricted to their home system immediately. All human colonies beyond Sol will be disbanded within 1 standard year. All faster-than-light-capable vessels will be surrendered to Council authorities. Earth's faster-than-light technology will be confiscated to prevent further violations of galactic law." Jake felt the weight of the decision settle over him like a physical blow. Millions of human colonists would be forced to abandon homes they had built over generations. Research stations, studying phenomena that could benefit all species, would be shut down. Medical facilities treating alien patients would close their doors. He activated his communicator with steady hands, knowing that this moment would echo through history. "All human vessels and installations. This is command. Initiate protocol. Exodus. We're going home." The transmission went out instantly, carried by quantum entanglement arrays to every human settlement in the galaxy. On distant worlds, families began packing their belongings. In deep space research stations, scientists powered down experiments that had taken years to set up. Medical teams treating plague victims prepared to leave their patients behind. Jake turned to face the Council one final time. The alien delegates watched him with expressions ranging from satisfaction to uncertainty. He could see doubt in some of their faces, as if they were already beginning to question whether they had made the right choice. "You've made your decision," Jake said quietly. "We'll respect it." His voice carried no anger, no pleading, no threats, just cold acceptance of reality. "Goodbye." As he walked toward the chamber exit with Dr. Carter beside him, Jake felt the eyes of 47 species watching his retreat. None of them spoke. None of them tried to stop him. They had gotten exactly what they wanted, and somehow it already felt like a mistake they could never take back. The evacuation began immediately across the galaxy as Admiral Scott Williams coordinated what historians would later call the largest civilian movement in recorded history. From mining colonies on distant asteroids to research stations orbiting alien suns, humans packed their belongings and prepared to leave worlds they had called home for decades. The process was methodical and quiet, with no protest or angry speeches broadcasted across galactic networks. On the agricultural world of New Montana, Farmer Bill Jackson stood in his wheat fields watching the golden grain sway in the alien breeze. His family had spent 30 years turning the barren soil into fertile farmland, using techniques that combined Earth knowledge with local conditions. The Kalani government had initially rejected human offers to share these methods, calling them primitive compared to their traditional approaches. Now they wanted to learn, but it was too late. "Pack everything," Bill told his wife Mary as they walked back toward their farmhouse. "The soil treatments, the seed banks, all the research data. If they want to figure it out on their own, let them." 3 systems away, Commander Amy Rodriguez supervised the shutdown of the medical research facility on Rigel 7. The station had been humanity's greatest success story, where Dr. Paul Anderson and his team had developed treatments for a plague that had killed millions across multiple species. The disease had been spreading for centuries before human doctors arrived. and their approach of combining genetic therapy with traditional medicine had finally brought it under control. The Zephyrian patients are only halfway through their treatment cycles, Dr. Anderson reported to Amy as they reviewed the evacuation timeline. If we stop now, the plague will return within months. It could spread to every world in this sector. Amy consulted her orders from Earth Command, hoping for some flexibility. But the instructions were clear and absolute. Complete withdrawal, no exceptions. We leave in 48 hours. The automated systems they left behind were programmed to provide basic care for 30 days, but everyone knew it would not be enough. The plague required constant monitoring and adjustment of treatments. Without human doctors to manage the complex therapy regimens, the disease would adapt and spread again. On the frontier world of Haven's Rest, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hughes led the evacuation of the human peacekeeping force that had been mediating a territorial dispute between the Drakmari clans and Vegan settlers for over a decade. The conflict had been slowly escalating for 50 years before humans arrived, with both sides committed to ancient grievances that neither fully understood anymore. The human peacekeepers had not imposed solutions or taken sides. Instead, they had patiently worked with both groups to find common ground, establishing trade agreements that benefited everyone, and creating joint projects that required cooperation. The violence had stopped, replaced by cautious but growing friendship between former enemies. Sergeant Lisa Park watched through her transport window as Drakmari and Vegan military units took positions on opposite sides of the settlement. Maybe we should stay until they work this out, she suggested to Hughes. Just a few more months to make sure the peace holds. Hughes shook his head firmly. Orders are orders. The council made it clear we're not wanted here. Within hours of the human departure, both sides began mobilizing for war. The trade agreements collapsed as old suspicions returned. The joint projects were abandoned as each group focused on military preparations. 50 years of careful progress, dissolved in a single day. Similar scenes played out across human space. On the research station orbiting the neutron star designated NGC 2174, scientists Dr. Kevin Lee and Dr. Susan Morris packed up experiments that had taken 8 years to set up. They were studying gravitational wave patterns that could revolutionize, faster-than-light travel, work that would benefit every species in the galaxy. The Arcturian Empire had originally funded the research, but then demanded exclusive rights to any discoveries, leading to a legal battle that had dragged on for years. The equipment alone cost more than most planets make in a decade, Dr. Morris said as they sealed the last storage containers. They'll never be able to reproduce this work. That's their choice, Dr. Lee replied, though his voice carried obvious sadness. Maybe they'll figure it out in a few centuries. The human merchant fleet began its withdrawal from trade routes that had connected dozens of worlds. Captain Danny Kim had spent 15 years building relationships with alien traders, learning their customs and languages, finding ways to make commerce work despite vast cultural differences. Human ships had served as neutral ground where species that normally avoided each other could meet and trade safely. The Centaurans and Rigelians will never deal directly with each other, Captain Kim explained to his crew as they set course for Earth. We were the bridge that made their trade possible. Without us, both their economies will suffer. The evacuation revealed the true extent of human integration into galactic society. Human doctors served in hospitals on 47 worlds. Human engineers maintained the power systems that kept 3 major trade hubs operational. Human diplomats had been quietly mediating disputes between species that had been enemies for thousands of years. Most of the galactic community watched the withdrawal with satisfaction. The troublesome humans were finally going back where they belonged, taking their disruptive ideas and reckless innovation with them. The established order would return to normal. Ancient protocols would be respected again. But some observers began to notice problems almost immediately. On Thesera 4, Kalani agricultural specialists realized they had no idea how to maintain the soil treatment systems that human farmers had installed. The equipment was simple enough to operate, but when it broke down, no one knew how to repair. Ambassador Thylas contacted the departing human agricultural team, hoping to arrange a brief consultation, but received no response. The humans were following their evacuation orders precisely, cutting all communication with alien governments. On the Rigel 7th, the plague began showing new symptoms just 2 weeks after the medical station went dark. Local doctors had been trained to administer the human-developed treatments, but they lacked the deep understanding needed to adapt when the disease mutated. Desperate calls for help went unanswered as human medical ships continued their journey toward Earth. The Drakmari-Vegan conflict escalated faster than anyone had predicted. Within a month, both sides were using weapons that had been banned for decades. The violence spread to 3 neighboring systems as old alliances pulled other species into the fighting. Civilian casualties mounted daily. Captain Julie Harris monitored the situation from her ship at the edge of the Sol system, watching long-range sensors as the galaxy began to unravel. Her orders were strict. Observe only, do not interfere. Earth's defensive grid was expanding rapidly, with new installations appearing around the outer planets every week. Whatever humanity was building out there, they were building it in secret. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it asked for. Humanity was going home, taking their medicine, their technology, their diplomatic skills, and their willingness to help with them. The ancient order was restored, the proper procedures were respected again, and the troublesome humans were contained. But as the weeks passed and the problems mounted, some species began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. 6 months passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and the problems that had seemed manageable at first began growing into genuine crises across multiple star systems. The Galactic Council chambers, once filled with confident voices celebrating humanity's departure, now echoed with increasingly desperate reports from member species. Ambassador Thylas of the Kalani stood before the emergency session, her plant-like form visibly wilted with stress. The crop failures have spread to 7 agricultural worlds, she reported in her wind-through-leaves voice. Our yields have dropped by 60% across all major food production systems. Our people are beginning to starve. The Kalani had tried everything they could think of to maintain the farming systems humans had left behind. They had studied the equipment manuals, followed the procedures exactly as written, and even brought in agricultural experts from other species. But the soil treatment systems required constant adjustment based on weather patterns, soil chemistry, and plant biology that the humans had understood intuitively after years of working with alien crops. Council Speaker Zethkari shifted uncomfortably on his throne. Surely your own agricultural scientist can develop alternative methods, he suggested, his silver scales reflecting his unease. We have been trying for 6 months, Thylas replied. Our traditional methods worked for thousands of years, but the human techniques increased our yields by 400%. Our population grew to match the increased food production. Now we cannot feed everyone. Across the chamber, the Zephyrian delegate was reporting even worse news. The plague has mutated beyond our ability to treat, she announced in her crystalline voice. It has spread to 12 worlds and killed over 50 million people. The human treatments no longer work against the new strains. The Zephyrian medical teams had followed the human protocols exactly, administering the same genetic therapies and medications that had controlled the disease for 5 years. But without human doctors to monitor the plague's evolution and adjust treatments accordingly, the disease had adapted faster than anyone expected. The automated systems left behind by the departing humans had run out of medicine 3 months ago. Hive Queen Zixandra clicked her mandibles together in obvious distress. Our industrial colonies in the Kepler expanse have become completely unproductive, she chittered. The mining equipment the humans installed requires maintenance procedures we do not understand. 7 major asteroid mining operations have shut down completely. The Insectoid Queen had sent her best engineers to study the human mining systems, but the technology was integrated in ways that seemed almost organic. The humans had not simply installed machines, they had created entire ecosystems of interconnected systems that adapted to changing conditions automatically. Without understanding the underlying principles, the Hive engineers could only watch as the systems gradually failed. Counselor Veltar of the Arcturian Empire looked older than his 800 years as he delivered his report. The Drakmari-Vegan conflict has expanded into a full sector war, he announced grimly. Both sides are using weapons of mass destruction. 3 civilized worlds have been rendered uninhabitable. The refugees are overwhelming our ability to provide aid. The war had escalated exactly as human peacekeepers had predicted it would. Ancient grievances that had been carefully managed for a decade exploded into violence that consumed everything in its path. Other species had tried to mediate, but they lacked the patience and cultural understanding that had made human peacekeepers successful. Every attempt at negotiation had failed, leading to more violence. Speaker Zethkari called for order as multiple delegates began talking at once, all reporting similar crises in their territories. Trade routes were failing without human merchant, ships to carry goods between hostile species. Research projects were stalling without human scientists to provide fresh perspectives. Diplomatic relationships that had taken centuries to build were collapsing without human mediators to bridge cultural gaps. "We need to contact Earth immediately," Thylas declared, her desperation overcoming diplomatic protocol. "We must ask for their help." "Absolutely not," Counselor Veltar snapped, though his voice lacked its former conviction. "We cannot appear weak by crawling back to them so soon. It has only been 6 months. Our people are dying," the Zephyrian delegate shot back. "Pride will not save them." Zethkari raised his clawed hand for silence. "We will attempt to contact Earth to discuss temporary assistance agreements," he decided. "Nothing permanent, just emergency aid until we can develop our own solutions." The Council's communications experts spent 3 days trying to establish contact with Earth. They sent messages through every known channel, broadcast on all standard frequencies, and even tried contacting human ships that might still be in deep space. Every transmission disappeared into what seemed like empty void. Captain Tony Lopez monitored these attempts from humanity's hidden observation post in the Alpha Centauri system, one of several secret stations that the departing humans had established, just beyond the galactic rim. His orders from Earth Command were crystal clear. Maintain complete radio silence until further notice. "They're getting desperate," observed Lieutenant Sarah Murphy, his communications officer, as she tracked another wave of Council messages. 57 attempts at contact in the last 24 hours. Lopez watched the tactical displays showing the expanding crises across the galaxy. The Void Wraiths, an extra-dimensional species that had been dormant for millennia, were beginning to probe the outer rim systems. Human deep space monitoring networks had been tracking Wraith activity for decades, providing early warning systems that the Council had taken for granted. Without those warnings, the first attacks would come as a complete surprise. "Too late for regrets," Lopez replied, remembering his orders. They made their choice. Back on Earth, President Martin Clark addressed the Global Assembly in a secure session. "The galaxy has made their feelings about humanity clear," he stated simply. "We will respect their wishes and focus on our own development." Dr. Susan Wright, Earth's foremost physicist, presented her findings to the classified assembly. "Our isolation has allowed us to pursue research paths that were previously impossible," she explained. "Without Council restrictions on dangerous experiments, we have made breakthrough discoveries in quantum mechanics, dimensional physics, and energy manipulation." The presentation detailed humanity's rapid technological advancement during their 6 months of isolation. Free from galactic regulations that had limited their research, human scientists had pushed into areas of study that other species considered too dangerous. They had learned to manipulate space-time directly, to tap into zero-point energy, and to exist partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We are no longer the same species that left the galaxy," Dr. Wright concluded. "The forced isolation has accelerated our evolution beyond anything we thought possible." Meanwhile, the automated monitoring stations that humans had left, scattered throughout galactic space, continued transmitting data back to Earth. The galaxy assumed these were simple communication relays, not realizing they formed a comprehensive surveillance network that tracked every ship movement, every military deployment, every political decision across 47 star systems. From their hidden bases beyond the galactic rim, humanity watched and learned as their former neighbors struggled with problems that had once been routine. The species that had cast them out as too young and reckless were discovering just how much they had relied on human innovation and adaptability. The silence from Earth grew more ominous with each passing day. 2 years had passed since humanity disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and the situation had deteriorated far beyond anyone's worst predictions. The Galactic Council no longer met in their grand crystal chambers above Nexus Prime, because Nexus Prime no longer existed as a functioning world. Instead, the surviving delegates gathered aboard a massive refugee ship, drifting in the void between star systems. Speaker Zethkari looked ancient now, his silver scales dulled and many missing from stress-related molting. He called the emergency session to order with a voice that had lost all its former authority. Around him, representatives from what remained of galactic civilization sat in makeshift chairs salvaged from a dozen different worlds. The Thessera sector has collapsed completely, reported what was left of the Kalani delegation. Ambassador Thylas had died 6 months ago during the food riots on her homeworld, and her replacement was a young administrator named Kylvin, who had never expected to hold such a position. 4 billion dead from starvation. The survivors have fled to primitive worlds where they can try to farm using pre-industrial methods. The crop failures had spread like a plague across Kalani space. Without human agricultural techniques, their expanded population could not be sustained. Entire civilizations had crumbled as people fought over dwindling food supplies. The lucky ones had managed to escape on ships to find new homes. The unlucky ones had starved or died in the violence that followed. Hive Queen Zixandra's replacement, a smaller queen named Tixera, delivered equally grim news. Our industrial capacity has dropped to 12% of pre-human levels, she chittered through damaged mandibles. The Kepler mining operations are completely shut down. Our colonies are reverting to subsistence survival. The hive species had discovered that their entire modern civilization depended on technologies they did not fully understand. The humans had not just provided equipment, they had created integrated systems that required constant innovation to maintain. Without that human adaptability, the systems had failed one by one until entire worlds were plunged back into technological dark ages. But the worst news came from the Arcturian delegate, a scarred veteran named Mortok, who had replaced Councillor Veltar after the latter died in the Battle of Rigel. The Void Wraiths have begun their assault, he announced, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. They emerged from dimensional rifts in the outer rim 3 months ago. We had no warning. The Wraith incursion had caught everyone completely by surprise. For thousands of years, human deep space monitoring stations had tracked the extra-dimensional entities that occasionally probed galactic space. The monitoring network had provided early warning whenever Wraith activity increased, allowing the Council to prepare defenses or evacuate threatened systems. Without those warnings, the first Wraith attacks had been devastating. Entire star systems had simply vanished, consumed by dimensional rifts that tore holes in reality itself. The few survivors described ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, beings that could phase through solid matter, weapons that destroyed targets by erasing them from existence. How many worlds have we lost? Zethkari asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 systems completely destroyed, Mortok replied. Another 34 partially consumed before the populations could evacuate. The Wraiths are moving toward the galactic core. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the major population centers within 6 months. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. The galaxy's combined fleets had tried to fight the Wraiths using conventional weapons and tactics, but their attacks had been useless against enemies that could exist in dimensions beyond normal perception. Every battle had been a massacre. Dr. Nora Evans, the former head of the Human Galactic Scientific Exchange, had published her research from Earth during the first year of humanity's exile. Her work, transmitted through automated systems before going silent, had detailed humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. She had written about their tendency to find elegant solutions to complex problems that other species overcomplicated, their willingness to take risks that others considered too dangerous, their ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. We never realized how much they were contributing, her final transmission had stated. Every human colony, Every research station, every diplomatic mission was a node in a vast network of problem-solving capability. Remove humans from the equation, and the entire system begins failing in ways we never anticipated. The Council had dismissed her warnings as bitter propaganda from a departed species. Now, with half the galaxy in ruins and an unstoppable enemy advancing toward the core worlds, her words seemed prophetic. "We have to contact Earth," Zethkari declared, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic dignity. "Whatever it costs. Whatever, we have to admit, we need their help." "We've been trying for 2 years," reminded the Regelian delegate. "Every message disappears into empty space. It's as if the Sol system no longer exists." "Then we send ships," suggested Mortok desperately. "Physical contact. Even if they refuse to help, we have to try." Zethkari nodded grimly. "Prepare a delegation fleet. Every species contributes what ships they can spare. We approach Earth directly and request aid." The fleet that assembled over the next month was pathetic compared to the armadas that had once patrolled galactic space. 15 damaged ships from 12 different species, carrying representatives who had once voted to exile humanity from the stars. They jumped toward Sol system with little hope, but no other options. When they arrived at the edge of human space, they found something that defied all understanding. The Sol system was surrounded by a sphere of energy that their sensors could not penetrate. No signals went in or out. No ships could approach. It was as if humanity had wrapped their entire star system in a barrier that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is impossible," whispered the fleet's science officer, a Centauran physicist named Velrun. "The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of a dozen stars. How could they build something like this in just 2 years?" The delegation fleet broadcast messages toward Earth for 3 days, receiving no response. They tried every frequency, every protocol, every communication method known to galactic science. Nothing penetrated the barrier around Sol system. On the 3rd day, as they prepared to return with news of their failure, something changed. The energy barrier flickered for just a moment, and a single message came through on an old human emergency. "Frequency, state your business." The voice was human but different somehow, carrying harmonics that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions. "You have 30 seconds. Zethkari himself took the communication. "This is Council Speaker Zethkari. We come seeking aid against the Void Wraith incursion. The galaxy is dying. We need your help." The silence stretched for long minutes before the voice responded. "You cast us out as too dangerous for your peaceful galaxy. Now you return because you face something more dangerous than us. Why should we care what happens to those who betrayed us?" "Because we were wrong," Zethkari admitted, his voice breaking with desperation. "We were fools. We threw away the greatest gift the galaxy ever received. Please, billions are dying." Another long silence then. "The galaxy made its choice. Now it lives with the consequences. Do not return to this system." The barrier solidified again, becoming impenetrable once more. The delegation fleet returned to the galactic core with the news that humanity existed, but would not help. They had found their former allies transformed into something beyond understanding, powerful enough to shield an entire star system from detection, but unwilling to save those who had cast them out. As the Void Wraiths continued their advance toward the heart of galactic civilization, the surviving species faced the terrible realization that they had created their own doom by driving away the only people who might have been able to save them. 5 years had passed since humanity's exile when the impossible happened above the ruins of what had once been the greatest civilization in the galaxy. The Void Wraiths had consumed half of known space, turning thriving worlds into dimensional wounds that bled darkness into reality. The surviving species huddled in refugee fleets, constantly running from an enemy that could tear through space itself to reach them. Speaker Zethkari stood on the bridge of the last council ship, watching his sensors display the approaching Wraith fleet that would end everything. His species, his civilization, his entire way of life would be erased within hours. Around him, the final representatives of 47 worlds waited for death with whatever dignity they could manage. Then space itself began to tear open. But instead of more wraiths emerging from the dimensional rifts, something else poured through. Ships that seemed to exist in multiple realities at once, their hulls shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The vessels moved with impossible precision, as if guided by minds that could see across dimensions simultaneously. The flagship that emerged first defied every law of physics the galaxy understood. It was massive, beyond comprehension, yet seemed to weigh nothing at all. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt to look at directly, geometric forms that existed in more dimensions than normal space allowed. From this impossible vessel came a transmission that reached every refugee ship across the sector. The voice was human but transformed, carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond normal hearing. Attention, surviving species of the Galactic Council. This is Admiral Kevin Mitchell of the Terran Dimensional Navy. We have come to end the Wraith incursion. Seth Carey stared at his communications array in shock. That's impossible, he whispered. No fleet that size could exist. The energy requirements alone would destroy any ship that tried to generate that much power. The human fleet numbered in the thousands, each vessel incorporating technology that seemed more like controlled magic than engineering. They moved through space in formations that bent reality around them, creating passages through dimensions that allowed instant travel across vast distances. Captain Chris Turner piloted one of the new dimensional fighters. His consciousness merged with quantum artificial intelligence systems that processed information across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Wraith cluster at dimensional coordinate 77 Mark IV, he reported through neural links that transmitted thoughts faster than light. Beginning phase shift attack. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The humans fought the wraiths not in normal space but in the quantum foundations of reality itself. Their weapons did not destroy targets so much as edit them out of existence, rewriting the fundamental mathematics that allowed matter to exist. Where wraith ships had once seemed invincible, phasing through attacks and striking from impossible angles, they now found themselves facing enemies who could exist in even more dimensions. Human vessels appeared inside wraith formations, fired weapons that struck across time as well as space, and vanished before retaliation was possible. Extra-dimensional entities that had consumed half the galaxy began collapsing as their anchor points in normal space were systematically eliminated. Dimensional rifts that had seemed permanent started sealing themselves as human technology restored the natural barriers between realities. Within 6 hours, the wraith presence in the sector had been completely eliminated. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years were reduced to quantum foam. Dimensional rifts that had devoured entire star systems were sealed and healing. Seth Carey tried to process what he had witnessed, but his mind struggled to accept the evidence of his sensors. How is this possible? He transmitted toward the human flagship. 5 years ago, you were barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Now you manipulate reality itself. Admiral Mitchell's image appeared on screens throughout the refugee fleet. He still looked human, but enhanced in ways that were difficult to describe. His eyes held depths that seemed to extend into other dimensions, and when he moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around him. 5 years ago, you told us we were too dangerous, too reckless, too young for your galaxy, Mitchell said, his voice carrying absolute authority. You were correct about the dangerous part, but you underestimated what we would become when forced to evolve alone. The image shifted to show the transformation of human space during their exile. Sol System had become the center of a technological renaissance that defied comprehension. Entire planets had been converted into quantum processing centers. Asteroids had been transformed into dimensional research facilities. The barrier around their system had not been a shield, but a chrysalis, protecting humanity while they underwent rapid evolution. When you cast us out, you removed every limitation we had accepted for the sake of galactic peace, Mitchell continued. We no longer had to worry about violating your laws or respecting your boundaries. We no longer had to hold back our research to avoid frightening you. We no longer had to limit our growth to match your comfort levels. The human fleet began to disperse as Mitchell spoke, individual ships heading toward the devastated worlds that needed immediate assistance. But their help came with conditions that made the surviving species deeply uncomfortable. Human medical teams saved plague victims, but refused to share their new treatments. Human engineers repaired damaged infrastructure, but kept the underlying technology secret. Human diplomats mediated conflicts, but only on humanity's terms. The galaxy is free to rebuild as it sees fit, Mitchell announced. But understand that humanity will never again ask permission to exist. We will never again accept limitations imposed by those who fear progress. We will never again trust our survival to the mercy of others. The implications were clear to everyone listening. Humanity had returned, not as the helpful junior partners they had once been, but as something far more powerful than the Council had ever imagined. They possessed technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, weapons that could erase matter from existence, defenses that could shield entire star systems from detection. You wanted us to respect galactic law. Mitchell's final words carried the weight of absolute finality. Now galactic law will respect us. Over the following months, the extent of humanity's transformation became apparent to the recovering galaxy. Human colonies were re-established not as settlements, but as fortress worlds protected by dimensional barriers. Human ships patrolled space lanes not as merchants but as guardians who enforced their own version of order. Human researchers pursued projects that other species could not even comprehend, manipulating time and space as casually as they had once grown crops. The old Galactic Council was never reformed. Instead, individual species managed their own affairs under humanity's distant but absolute protection. Trade flowed again, but according to human regulations. Conflicts were resolved, but only when humans chose to intervene. The galaxy had peace, but it was the peace of subjects under the watchful eye of beings who had transcended the need for their approval. President Elena Rodriguez addressed the United Nations of Earth from the transformed capital that now existed partially in 11 dimensions simultaneously. We learned that respect cannot be demanded or legislated, she said to an audience that included both humans and the artificial intelligences they had merged with. It must be earned through strength, wisdom, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. The galaxy had indeed learned to respect humanity, but it was the fearful respect accorded to gods who remembered every slight and chose mercy over vengeance. In trying to control humanity's growth, they had accelerated it beyond all recognition. The species they had feared as reckless children had become patient, powerful beings who no longer needed anyone's permission to reshape reality according to their will. Humanity kept their word in the end. They had learned to respect galactic law by making themselves the ultimate arbiters of what law meant. The Council got exactly what they had asked for, and discovered too late that getting your wish can be the cruelest punishment of all.